As you guys know, they made a lot of changes to the Annual Forage program for 2024. So our IT department has been busy trying to get everything updated. What you're going to see today are some really exciting changes in the quoting side of things that are going to help you key the policy faster. You're going to notice that when we get more to the unit acreage sides, there's going to be a couple things that we haven't got fixed yet. Still working on them. It's going to be fixed as quickly as we can, but we know we're all getting questions. Everybody wants to start in just because of all of the changes with the program. So we kind of released a first wave, and that's what I'm going to show you today and kind of show you the things that are coming as well. This is available in 2024 right now. We have rolled all of the annual forage policies that are existing into the 2024 system. With the interval changes that they made, we went and ran a script so that any intervals that were exactly the same in 2023, in 2024 now, we ran a script to update those. But anything obviously where the growing season intervals have changed, those do have to be manually updated. You guys know that all of your annual forage policies for 2024 are going to need a new application signed to update the growing seasons, update your intervals. So what I'm fixing to show you today will hopefully make that process go a little bit smoother. So as you can see, I have the easy quote screen pulled up, and I am going to click the MPCI button to open the quoting screen that you are all used to seeing. From the quote line attributes, I am going to select the state and select my county. Now, because it's early in the 2024 year, it's going to automatically pre-fill annual forage because that's the only crop where the ADM information has been released. So that's one thing that's a little bit nice, save a little bit of time. And then from the index interval dropdown, I just need to select growing season 1, the interval that I want. It's going to pre-fill the level and the productivity factor. If you want to edit those, you can do so in either of those boxes. And then I am going to select dual use. From the grid ID dropdown, if you know your grid ID, you can select it here. If you're not certain where the ground is located or what the grid ID is for that ground, you can click the grid ID locator and using these search features determine which grid ID is correct. I will say this is something where changes are coming down the road that will make this much easier. Basically better ways to search for that grid ID, but for right now, this is as it is today. And once again, that was from this locate grid ID. It is going to default to 100 acres. And then all you have to do is put in your percent of value. The one thing I did want to mention, if you are using this as a quote, keep in mind that when you elect the dual use here, it does reduce that county base value. So if you're using this as a keying tool, electing the dual use on this screen is going to save you some time on the Easy Writer Pro side, but it does affect your quote. So just keep that in mind. Depending on what you are wanting to use this for, this can affect the quote because it reduces your county base value. So now that I have all of the required information keyed in on this screen, I'm going to hit save. When you set up your first coverage line for an annual forage policy, it's going to automatically pull you into the historical screen. So there's all kinds of information available to you here, but for today's example, we're really just focusing on the keying side of things. So on the right-hand side, it's going to show your intervals, and it already has my 33% filled in from the first line that I set up. It's grayed out the next one because, as you know, for annual forage, you cannot overlap any of your months. So now all I'm going to do is put in the interval percentages for my other intervals. I have it down to 100%. So this tool will keep track, make sure that you don't go over 100%, but also that you get to 100%. So now I'm going to hit apply on the right-hand side, and then I need to hit apply one more time up here at the top. And once I hit that apply button in the two different spots, you can see that it has added those coverage lines over here. So now when I click back to full farm, I have all of my coverage lines set up for growing season 1. So now I have to go through the process of setting up my additional growing seasons. So what I think is the easiest is while I have one of the growing seasons selected, come up here to duplicate. It's going to pull in everything that we previously keyed in. So now from my or from my drop down, I'm going to select my growing season 2 interval. And then very important on this screen, you click create a new coverage. Hit continue. Something I do want to mention is the unit number. So you can go through and update the unit numbers. If you're somebody that has a specific way to number those, feel free to update those accordingly. With the rainfall policies though, unit numbers do not affect your coverage or liability. So it's not something that personally I waste a lot of time on, just because no matter what you number them, it doesn't affect your liability. So you can update that if needed. Like I said, leave dual use selected to help you with keying. Keep in mind it does reduce your county base value. Select your grid ID from the dropdown. Something else to keep in mind if you're utilizing this for a quote is when I hit the duplicate button, it's duplicating the reduced acres. So if you want to get this back to 100 for quoting purposes, you can update that there and then key in your percent of value and hit save. So now, because this is not the first coverage line I set up on the quote, now I have to come up to the top and click historical. And then you're going to see the same option on the right-hand side. So key in your interval percentages, key it correctly, hit apply. And then the second apply is at the top. I have my coverage lines created. So now when I go back to full farm, now I have growing season 1 and 2. So I'm going to go through that a couple more times. The thing about the quote is we've put a lot of time into the quote to get all this updated. So when you're looking at your different interval options, it's only going to show you the intervals that are actually allowed for that state and county. Okay. Apply, and then hit apply again. Click back to full farm, and we'll do it a couple more times. Create a new coverage. Grid ID from the drop down, and hit save. Okay, so now I've set up 1 through 4. I'm going to do one more set just to kind of go into the new growing seasons. Like I mentioned, it does know what is available for the state and county. So as you can see for Kansas, it does not allow you to elect growing season 5 or 6 since those are not available growing seasons for the state of Kansas. So I'm going to select growing season 4. And then also now that I have moved growing season 4, growing season 7, and now you can see that once I've elected that, the dual option goes away. So the quoter is also smart enough to only allow you to select dual use for the growing seasons where that's truly available. So I'm going to go through this process one more time. Hit save, go to the historical tab, apply, apply, and full farm. Okay, so now I've set up basically 5 growing seasons, matter of minutes. And now this is the exciting part. So once I have all of my coverages set up, I can go up to application and do create temp MPCI policy. So now you're looking at the same temporary application screen that you are all familiar with. So you can key in the date. You can use this option 2 different ways, same as keying a temporary application in EasyWriter Pro. If you already have a signed application and you're just wanting to input it, then make sure you key in the actual insured signature date. If you're using this to generate your application, then just leave it as today's date and we can update the signature date accordingly once we have that signed application. Now, when you are logged into EasyWriter Pro, it's going to default to your agency information. I'm going to manually key that in and then select the agency or the agent. If this will be a transfer, it is very important that you tell us what AIP it's transferring from. If you know the previous policy number, great. If you don't worry about it at all. Don't key it in, just leave it blank. That's not a problem. Okay, moving over to the entity search. If the entity already exists in the system, when you key in the complete tax ID, it will pre-fill down below if it already exists in the system. And I will tell you in test, the screen has been a little temperamental. Okay. There we go. If you needed to set up a new entity from this screen, once you key in the tax ID, you can click Create New, and that will pull in the tax ID that you keyed here, and you can create a new entity. So same functionality that you're used to. So now all I need to do is select the entity type and then tell the system that the applicant is at least 18 years old. Now, when I click Apply, it's going to pull this all into a temp policy in EasyWriter Pro. So I'm going to hit yes. And then all of the coverages that we just keyed in the quote have populated here. And then the other exciting thing is on the Acreage APH tab, it also generates all of your units for you. So in one screen, in a matter of minutes, we've set up all of our growing seasons and we've set up a set of units for each growing season. So it can save you quite a bit of time. So that's how you can kind of start the process in the quoter. You also have the ability, just like normal, to add your coverages how you have in the past. So if you click add here, and then all of these you can key in or you can select from the drop down. Okay. Select August, September. The level, it's going to pre-fill your productivity factor to 150, but that can be changed if needed. And then something else that we've added to just help get these policies keyed faster. Once you key one coverage here, if you hit copy and add, it's going to fill in a lot of that information that you just keyed. So now all you would need to do is key in your next growing season, which we will do June, July, and then key in your percent of value. So a couple different tools that we have added in to help. This is a new feature, and with all new features, sometimes there are bugs. Right now, there is a bug where it's pulling in the unit option if you use the copy and add feature. It won't let you delete it out, and then if you hit save, it throws a system error. That is a known bug that we are working on getting corrected. This is the error I'm talking about. So for right now, if you use that copy and add feature, there is a bug. Hopefully it will be fixed very quickly, because with that copy and add feature, it is helpful to set up additional growing seasons a little faster. Okay, a couple other things I wanted to show. Now I'm going to click over on the Acreage APH tab. So you guys know that if you want to set up one unit, you could come down to the lower left, hit your add button, and set that one grid, one interval up individually. My recommendation for rainfall policies, so your PRF, your annual forage, is to use this quick unit button instead. So up at the top, if you select quick unit and key in your unit number, key in your share information, select your grid from the dropdown. Right now, it's going to make you key in a location. So all you have to do is key in at least one FSN. One change that's coming specific to this screen is that you will not be forced to key in a location, since everything on a rainfall policy is by grid. So you will be able to bypass keying this in and click next. So now this is going to show all of the coverages on the screen. If you scroll down to the growing seasons you want to select, This is something else that a change is coming where once you select it here, it's automatically going to pre-fill the practice here. So that's going to save quite a bit of time in the future. Something else to keep kind of be aware of for right now, this is another one of those lovely bugs, is that for right now on the units, it's going to show all of the new intervals, but it also shows all of the old intervals. So if you're in growing season 1 through 4 and you're manually setting up units, the quoter is smart enough to set them up correctly, but we just haven't got it updated on the acreage APH side yet. So keep that in mind. Growing season 1 through 4, it will show the old, like your 660 number, as well as the new. So with this, you can go through and elect your intervals. And I'm just keying in that GS7 to kind of get me quickly to my growing season 7 options. And then with that, when I hit save, it sets up 3 units for growing season 7. Something else that you have to do right now when you use the quick unit feature, it wants you to manually click on each of these lines and then hit save. That is something that we are doing away with as well, so that in the future when you click quick unit, it will automatically set those up for you without having to click on them. Okay, so that's kind of keying them in the quoter and then manually keying coverages as well as manually setting up units. So now if I want to generate my application, all I have to do is come up here to commit. Still getting that lovely unit option error. It's going to give you a reminder when you go to commit this policy that you have not set up all growing seasons. So once again, I mentioned it before, you're not required to put all growing seasons on your policy, but for any growing season that is not on the policy at sales closing, there is no ability for coverage at acreage reporting. So there's no revisions allowed on that. It's very important. If they're going to want coverage, it has to be added to the policy at sales closing. So this is just a reminder. It's not going to stop you from committing the policy. And then once I get to my commit screen, you have some different options. So I'm going to uncheck confirmation of coverage, but leave this new documents selected and then hit commit. And then you're going to have all of your standard options. So you can send your application to the queue. You can download a PDF of it. You can send it to eSign, which is, EasyWriter Pro's kind of version of DocuSign, where you can digitally send those for signatures to your insureds. So I am going to add the application. For your brand new policies, while they're still temp, you do have the option to elect unmasked tax IDs, and that way it saves you from having to manually write those in before you send the application to your underwriter to set active. I want to show this application just because, like I mentioned, we are still working on a lot of the changes that they've released, but as you can see, these forms are still usable is the point I want to make. So for growing season 1 through 4, you can see in this column, it has pulled in the growing season number, but on all of the other growing seasons that we keyed, there are still lines available for them. So you can still utilize the pre-printed forms out of EasyWriter Pro. Just remember that until we get these fixed, you might just have to add in the growing season. So like for this, if I were to go in and add 7 in this column, that makes this form completely acceptable. Right now, they're saying that the pre-filled forms should be corrected about mid-June. So we're getting close to those being updated. But if you were to go in today, as long as you add in that missing information, this form is perfectly acceptable. This grid right here obviously has not been updated. So that's something that will be updated with that change, where it's going to show all of the growing seasons and then all of the updated intervals for each growing season. If you are using any blank forms, all of those have been updated. So if you go out to the website under company forms, you can generate your blank forms and manually fill those in. But then if you want to use the pre-printed, just keep in mind your different pieces that might have to be manually filled in. Okay, so that's kind of a lot of the, new exciting things that we have released, but we're going to go a little bit further and go into actually keying acres on an annual forage policy as well. So I hopped into a different policy that I have open and ready, and I wanted to show a couple different things. So this policy right now has fields mapped to it. I'm going to go through and add just a couple extra fields because I want to show kind of a trick that I use a lot on rainfall policies. So from within mapping, I'm going to click on the quick navigation button. And then from the drop down, I'm going to change it to the Sims fields by FDF. So now I have keyed in the FSN and track. I did not key in a field. And when I hit search, it's going to pull up and highlight the fields that have that FSN and track. So if I wanted to add all of these fields right now, I could click this green plus sign. It would add all of those fields to the policy. If there were only certain that I wanted to add, I'm just clicking on the red minus sign beside any fields I do not want to add. That's going to leave these 3 fields selected. So now when I click the green plus sign, it will add those 3 fields to the policy. So this is just kind of a trick that if you don't key in the field number and you have multiple fields to add with the same FSN and track, it can save you a little bit of time to add multiple fields to the policy at once. Okay, so now I am ready to actually key acres on this policy. So I'm going to click the acreage tab up top, and with your rainfall policies, that opens up the quick river screen. So now on the left-hand side, we are going to have a view that correlates with each growing season that we have keyed and also share. So one thing I want to point out, this top one right here does not show a growing season. So this is our growing season 7. This is another thing that we just haven't got to the release yet. So once we get a little bit closer, this will start showing growing season 7. But for right now, if you have units set up for growing seasons after growing season 4, you're not going to see that label until we get that fixed. So I want to key acres in growing season 1. So I'm going to click the plus sign beside this view 2. You have a couple different ways to do this. So one, you can click directly on your fields. You can drag and highlight multiple fields. As you can see, as I'm selecting the fields on the right, it's updating my field acreage totals on the left. So this is one way to directly click on the fields in the map. Depending on the size of your annual forage policy, or if you have a lot of different little fields, I use this assigned fields button a lot. So it's going to pull up a list of all of the FTFs that have been mapped to the policy. It's already highlighting the ones that I have clicked here. So you can go through and select the fields that you want to report on, or you can unselect if needed. And when I hit OK, it will update those accordingly. Now, if I want to deselect those, this button right here will uncheck everything that I have previously clicked on. So for this example, I'm just going to select this group of fields right here. And now we have to go to another screen to actually report those acres. And kind of just a little side note, the rainfall policies are something that we are currently working on redesigning. So this is how it works today. In the future, there will be a lot less clicks, a lot less back and forth. It is a project that we have actively started working on and designing. So right here, I scrolled over. It's showing the FSN track and field. It's showing the mapped acres and the reported acres. If you need to report less than 100% of the acres, you can tweak that here by just keying in how many they are actually reporting. And then because I elected dual use on the coverage, I have the ability to select dual use here. just one little side note, dual use is something that is elected at acreage reporting. So if you put it on the coverage at sales closing, it's going to make it very easy and seamless for you to do so at acreage reporting. But if you, for whatever reason, do not put dual use on the policy at sales closing, that's perfectly okay. You'll have to send it to your underwriter. We can add the option to the coverage. And then when you go into the acreage lines, you will have the ability to key dual use. So my recommendation is to go ahead and add dual use to the coverage line so that it is ready for you if you need it when you're keying acres and you don't have to wait on anybody. So now when you click in the crop box, you will see this button show up. Now you just have to tell us the crop type, and the intended use. So the organic practice and the irrigation practice are not required unless you have organic or the irrigation practice is required by actuarials. So I am going to key in the plant date and hit OK. And then we just have to go through that process for each field. It does pull in the plant date that I already keyed. And one more. Okay, so now I have reported the fields. I've put in all the required information, kind of did a double check that my field acres are correct. The last thing we have to do is the point of reference. So from the Quick River screen, one way to get there is down below, point of reference. I want to open up the point of reference editor. Okay, so now all I need to do is click add recommended points. It knows where I actually planted acres for this growing season, so it put a point of reference on each of those fields. So now I just need to click accept, save and close. You can see that view 2 for growing season 1 where I have planted acres turned green. So that means that there is a point of reference for that view. So now I just click save and close out of mapping. And now all I need to do is commit the policy. And we have completely set up a policy in less than 30 minutes. So we set up all of the coverages, all of the units, and even keyed acres. And that is basically the gist of the training today. So now we can just kind of pivot over if there's any questions.
Yes, Jenny, we do have one question so far. I know the first part, and maybe you can answer the second part. It says, once we key in all growing seasons for Farmer A, is there a way to duplicate the same one for Farmer B?
Yes, and I would have actually forgotten to show that, so I'm glad somebody asked that. So there is from the quoter. So this, I clicked right back into that quoter that I had generated. So if you have somebody that has the exact same coverage, all I did was click right back into this quote and I can go back up to application and send it to a completely different temp policy. So you don't have to rekey the same information again. Just use that quote that you already set up and create a different temp policy. One thing Jeff kind of mentioned, because he's just very comfortable in the quoter, he mentioned, oh, well, you can add the policyholder. You can, but if you do that, then you kind of lose your ability to send it to different policies. So as a different option, you can save this quote. And then as long as you don't associate a policyholder with it, you can access this quote again and pull it into multiple temp policies so that you're not having to rekey that same information over and over. Was there any other questions?
Yes. Can we use the application and change form for the apps instead of the policy transfer application form?
Yes, you can, and it works exactly the same. So right now for your growing seasons after 4, it's not going to fill in that growing season column. So same thing, as long as you add that in, that policy form is acceptable as well.
If an insured has land in multiple grids, do we have to have a line for each season interval for each grid at sales closing?
No. So annual forage, it's just by growing season, and then all of the grids are done on the unit side. So that's not something that has to be added to the policy at sales closing. Just make sure you have each growing season on the policy. And then grids are elected by acreage reporting.
Can NAU build the Quick River system to where you can select multiple fields and key in the crop type,
Yep.
organic, etc.?
So that's something, like I mentioned, that we are working on a rewrite, and that was at the top of the request list, almost to kind of allow you to key annual forage more like your traditional MPCI policies where you can mass select fields and apply the same information. So that is definitely something that has been requested. Unfortunately, you don't want to get too excited because we're rewriting all of our rainfall policies. So we're probably a couple years away from that being released, but that is definitely something that has been noted about annual forage and will be corrected in the newer system.
We'll be able to report acres using easy mobility.
No, I don't think that you can right now. I would have to double check that, but Jeff's telling me no.
Not saying it's something that won't be looked at in the future, but with the amount of changes we're just trying to handle today, it's not something that's most likely going to be available in 2024. Can you go in and adjust the quote each time it varies per application before you create the policy, or do you have to do a new quote?
So you can come in here and tweak the quote. The problem is there's a stop. So if you were to change the intervals, it doesn't allow you to overlap them. So if you're making a lot of changes to intervals, it's easier to set up a new one just because it won't allow you to, I'm going to show you. Like if I wanted to change it to the alternating and do October, November, as soon as I try to hit save, it's telling me, no, that's overlapping with this existing interval. So it doesn't allow you to do that on the quote side very easily. It would be easier probably to set a new one up. Or if you just wanted to change it like on one growing season, you could delete those 3 lines and just set up a new set for growing season 1. Now in Easy Writer Pro, it will allow you to tweak those and you're not going to get any kind of trouble with the overlapping while you're working on it. But in the quoter, it does try to stop you.
Assuming a client wants annual forage policy in multiple counties, what would be the most efficient way to set up all those policies in your opinion?
Well, unfortunately, that's kind of just agent or insured preference. You can set multiple counties up by state. So as long as they're all in the same state, you can put multiple on one policy, or you can split each county out to its own policy. So I don't know. I don't personally have a preference other than annual forage policies can get pretty lengthy with all of the intervals and growing seasons that are required to be keyed. So probably aesthetically, I think it might look better to have them on separate, but quite honestly, it is agent insured preference.
Can you show me to where to go for the quotes?
Yep. So from your dashboard, yours is going to look a little bit different, but the easiest way to get to the quote is right here. Now, something else that is coming in the future, hopefully in the next couple months, the feature that I showed you right now out of Easy Quote is only available to generate temp apps. So if they already have an existing policy, the quoter cannot be used right now to affect coverage, but it's something that they are actively working on and hoping that it will be released in the next couple weeks. So if you have a policy that already exists and you need to do a lot of work to update the growing seasons, when you are in the policy, you can also access Easy Quote from there, Or when you click into Easy Quote, you can open an existing policy as well. And then with the change that's coming in a couple weeks. So for right now, temp policies only. In a couple weeks, it's going to be expanded to work on existing rainfall policies only. So all of these changes right now are specific to rainfall. And then you would be able to open an existing policy in the quoter, make your changes, and then basically there'll be another drop down where we went to create MPCI policy. There'll be another option that says update existing RI policy, I think is what the new verbiage will say. And then it's going to make you verify a couple clicks to say, yes, I truly want to pull this information into my rainfall policy, but then it will go through and update all those coverages for you. So like I said, hopefully you see that feature released in the next week or couple weeks or two.
Once you move from growing season 1 in your example on the historical tab on to the next growing seasons, how do you get from the historical tab back to growing season 1 if you only wanted to change the allocations?
I'm not sure I'm entirely following. So when I'm in the full farm, if I have like growing season 1 selected, I can get back to the historical tab up top. Quite honestly, it's not super easy to tweak the intervals. Like I said, it's almost like if you're wanting to change your interval, it's really easier to delete those and add them new rather than trying to tweak those. If you were to go into the historical tab and click your edit interval percentages, you can change your percentages, but it doesn't talk back to the full farm side just because you get that same error that it thinks you're overlapping and doing your intervals incorrectly. So you can get back to tweak your interval percentages, but really once you have it set up on the full farm, it's easier to just delete those and key them new if there are massive changes needed to those growing seasons. Does that answer that question?
That was the last question in the chat. If I accidentally skipped over yours, or you have any more questions, certainly type them in now. As I said, this presentation, we are recording it. We should have it available here in the next day or two. Get with your marketer and we can get it out to you once it becomes available to us. As far as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, the changes to the policy, Patrick Umbarger and I did that presentation last week, and it is out there and available. That recording is available. The presentation is available under the training tab under the help library. But if you would like the presentation from last week where we actually go into just the policy information, that is available. And like I said, we will get this, what Jenni did today, out as soon as we can. Just for any presentations or information that you would need, get with your marketing rep and we will get that out to you as soon as possible. With that, there does not seem to be any other questions. So I'm going to stop the recording. Like I said, thank you all for tuning in today. As Jenni mentioned, there are additional tweaks coming to the system. Be patient. Reach out to your marketer underwriter and we'll let you know as we get those updates out. With that, thank you for your time.